Good morning, everyone. Today's March 24th, 2023, and I'm Tommy Woods, Chairman of the Tennessee Wildlife Fish Commission. Today, we'll be conducting both a committee and full commission business. At this time, I'd like to call on Commissioner Wright for the invocation and pledge. Please stand.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your creation and for these resources and that all that you are to us. We're grateful for the responsibility to care for these resources that we all love and cherish. We ask for the gift of wisdom and discernment today, that all of our decisions and actions are a reflection of that. Please guide us today in our discussions and our service to these resources and to the citizens of our great state that enjoy them. It's in your Son's name, Jesus, that we pray. Amen. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. Welcome to Buffalo Ridge. First of all, I want to start off by thanking the staff here. It's a pleasure each and every time we show up here. The hospitality shown is second to none, and it's always a highlight of the year coming to Buffalo Ridge and seeing the agency at its best. So we have some guests today. We have Pam Morphus, retired mother of TWRA Region 1. I believe she raised Jason, I'm pretty sure. And of course, Clarence and Laura Dye. Well, we thank them for their faithfulness to us and the goodies they bring each month. Mark Rich from Huntington, Tennessee, and Jeff Bennett, also from Huntington, Tennessee, and Nathan Rice from Huntington, Tennessee, and Mayor Sheila Butt, and that would be Commissioner Butt's wife, and of course, former chairlady Angie Box, commission, and our very special guest, Earl and Janet Bentz. Welcome. We really appreciate everyone being here. Danette, will you call the roll?
Chris Devaney. Here. Jimmy Granberry.
Here.
Monty Ballou. Stan Butt.
Here.
Wally Childress.
Here.
Bill Cox.
Here.
Chip Saltzman.
Here.
Hank Wright.
Here.
Brad Box.
Here.
Rhonda Moody. Kent Woods.
I'm back.
Greg Davenport.
Here.
Tommy Woods.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Danette. So before you, we have February's minutes. I hope everyone's looked those over. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
A second from Stan. We have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good. February minutes are approved. At this time, I'd like to recognize Director Maxedon. But first, I'd like to make an announcement here. We have a commissioner's birthday today, and it's Commissioner Saltman. So let's all give him a hand.
No singing.
All right.
No singing.
Okay. Go ahead, Director.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is an exciting meeting for us because we're excited to welcome 3 new commissioners to our team: Commissioner Brad Box, Commissioner Rhonda Moody, and Commissioner Greg Davenport. Welcome. We're looking forward to getting to know each of you better and optimistic about the skills and perspectives each of you bring to the table. Thank you for your service already. We also are happy to welcome back, as Commissioner Woods said, Commissioner Woods and Commissioner Saltzman. We're excited to get both of them back joining our team again. We're going to be very grateful for the service that you also provide to the commission and glad to keep you around just a little bit longer. Commissioners, usually what I do is recognize one of our staff members. For the 4 new commissioners that are new, we typically do this at each meeting. I typically share a staff success story to highlight how incredible our team is. However, this month, it's with heavy heart that we're recognizing a member of our staff who passed away suddenly. On the screen here, if you'll pop that up, Mr. Don, you can see one of our fisheries creel clerks. This is Gary Locks. Gary grew up in Pennsylvania on a dairy farm and served in the Army during the Vietnam War. For his service, he was awarded the Bronze Star, National Defense Service Medal, and Vietnam Service Medal. Gary was at TWRA for 13 years and provided dedicated service to the Region 4 Angler Survey Program, gathering angler use information from several area reservoirs and rivers. Gary was an avid outdoor photographer with a passion for birds and especially eagles. He was actively involved in American Eagle Foundation projects and worked with staff to educate and promote raptor conservation. It's always hard for us to lose staff, and we're grateful for the work that Gary did while he was part of the team. We'll continue to remember his family in our thoughts and prayers, if you will. Our staff always work hard. We've got a special day today. You're going to be hearing about season-setting recommendations. This month, the wildlife staff, Joe Benedict and his team, will be presenting the season-setting recommendations to us shortly. Since we were founded 74 years ago, season setting and the regulation of hunting game species has been one of our most fundamental missions. It's one of the most important parts of being a commissioner. The thoughtful science-based regulations that we've created over the years have revived big game species from critically low numbers to the huntable populations that we're able to enjoy today. Even though this is a lighter year for recommendations, we're confident that we will end the day with regulations that benefit both the wildlife populations and the hunters that we serve and that rely upon us for putting food on the table and great outdoor recreational opportunities. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Director Maxedon. At this time, I recognize Jimmy Granberry, Commissioner of Retention, Recruitment, and Reactivation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my honor today to bring back up to the mic former Chairman Angie Box to make a very special award to a very special person and a great friend of mine.
Thank you, Commissioner Granberry. Commissioners, Chairman Woods, it's good to be back. I want to thank Director Maxedon for inviting me back to present this award. The Legacy Award was created by Commissioner Tony Sanders to recognize an individual that demonstrates a level of commitment to hunting, fishing, and outdoor lifestyle in Tennessee. Earl Bentz, from the age of 15, has worked and lived boating. In the past 30 years, he successfully developed 4 boating manufacturing companies, including Stratus, Javelin, Triton, and Camus. He developed the innovative retractable boat ladder, which he received an Award of Excellence for life-saving innovations by the National Boating Council. Between personal and corporate donations, he has helped raise millions of dollars for some of America's most charitable organizations. Earl was key in reintroducing elk in Tennessee in 2000. He played a large role in creating the Tennessee Wildlife Foundation. He also served on the Tennessee Wildlife Commission. He mentors youth in hunting and fishing, including his 4 grandsons, 3 daughters, and 3 son-in-laws. His wife, Janet, reside in Nashville, Tennessee. Would you like to come back, accept your award? Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Won't talk long, but I did prepare a few remarks. I am very appreciative and humbled of this award bestowed upon me by the organization that I admire the most, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Yesterday, I looked up legacy in the dictionary to get a formal understanding of its meaning. What exactly does legacy mean? And it described legacy as a long-lasting impact of particular events, actions, etc., that took place in the past in a person's life. In my opinion, the real recipients of this award are the 748 employees of TWRA and the wildlife commissioners who selfishly give of your time to represent the public, balance the wants and needs of your constituents in your respective districts in the science and biology of managing wildlife and fish in this state. It's a volunteer position, doesn't pay very well, as we all know, but thank you for your contributions to this and sacrifices that you make. You know, I look back, we talk about the elk reintroduction program, and I was chairman. Gary Meyer came to me and said, what would you like to do? You're last year's chairman of this commission. I said, I'd like to get free-ranging elk back in Tennessee. And he said, well, we have made an agreement with the Farm Bureau that we wouldn't do that. And I said, in all due respect, Director, I didn't make that agreement. You did. And being an independent, unpaid person, Commissioner, I'm going to go meet with Flavius, the president at the time of Farm Bureau, and see if we can patch things up between TWRA and the Farm Bureau. We did, and he never would, Flavius never would approve it, but he told me that he would quietly oppose it if we improved our reaction time for crop depredation, other things, landowner exemption, and other things that the Farm Bureau wanted. And within a year, we had free-ranging elk back in Tennessee. Now, the person that led this, just more than one, but really the guy that spearheaded it was Larry Markham, the late Larry Markham, my good friend, wildlife chief, TWRA. You're talking about a legacy. I mean, here's an animal that's been extinct for 150 years in this state. And Larry coordinated everything with Campbell County in East Tennessee, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the trade with Elk Island in Alberta, Canada to get the elk. Greg Watham, his assistant, they worked tirelessly. It was not that they didn't have a lot of other things to do, but all I did was open the door and handle the politics. The state vet is, Hope State Vet's not here. Maybe he's retired. But he put a roadblock up for us, and it so happened that Don Sundquist, who was governor at the time, sat in front of me at the Titan football games. And in August, State Vet had said, no, they're not coming in here. Well, Don Sundquist, I tapped on his shoulder at halftime, and I said, Governor, I need a little help. He said, what you need? I said, the State Vet's put a roadblock up, won't let us bring elk in Tennessee. He said, the Farm Bureau is not going to let you do that either. I said, I've already got that handled. He said, I'll take care of the State Vet Monday morning. And by noon, we had approval, ironically enough, from the State Vet to get out. And couldn't move until it cooled down. So December and January, we started moving elk in. But Larry, Markham, and Greg did all the work. All we did was handle some of the behind the scenes stuff. And I mean, that's what a legacy is all about, in my view. Bill Reeves and Bobby Wilson took the bold step to introduce Florida bass in Tennessee waters during my term on the commission. We put them in Chickamauga and Kentucky Lake, and within 10 years, they were catching 45-pound five-fish stringers out of Chickamauga. It has now become a destination for fishermen. Fishing is better in Tennessee. What y'all have done and what this commission has done to apply funding to help control the Asian carp has helped Kentucky Lake come back to levels that we saw back in the 90s and early 2000s. And again, Bill came from Alabama. They had F1s, which is a cross between the Florida and the Northern, but it helped again to take our state. It's a vision. It took our state to the next level to create the fishing. Jack Murray, who headed up our turkey program. Again, someone working in conjunction with the Wild Turkey Federation. He left, I believe Jack's brain was half turkey. And he loved it. I mean, he was passionate about it. And he was protective of it and communicated with the public to help protect our birds. And now we've got a wonderful hunting population. I got up, only heard one gobble in the wind this morning, but one of my favorite pastimes. But another guy who has left a legacy for sportsmen to enjoy for decades to come. I said the 748 employees, the wildlife officers, every one of our wildlife officers and the people who support them, who teach our hunter education classes, who introduce our young people and youth and introduce women to the outdoors. They're leaving a legacy, planting seeds for the future. And all of their support staff, all of the biologists, all the volunteers who teach hunter safety classes. You all are the ones that are deserving of a legacy award, if anyone is for sure. You are the heroes in my book. I will always be grateful for this great honor, one of the greatest honors of my life. I like to hunt and fish. I hope the good Lord never makes me choose between them. It'd be tough. We have a family, Janet and I. We've been married 42 years. We've got 3 daughters, 3 son-in-laws, 4 grandsons, 2 more on the way. And they all hunt and fish. And we believe in families that hunt and fish together, stay together. And we applaud you for being shepherds of fish and game for current and future generations. I can't wait to see under Jason's leadership what's going to be accomplished in the next 20 years in the great state. So I thank you very much for this honor. More than you know, undeserving on my part. You guys are the ones that deserve it, but thank you. And we got to go to Knoxville for the Bassmaster Classic. So do a little work. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We'll get you and Miss Janet to stand here. Angie's going to present you right there. She's going to give you a plaque. Get that thing out of there. Let me just tear it.
While everybody's sitting, I have something to say about what Earl didn't say. Early in the existence of the foundation, it ran into some hard times where our foundation almost went out of business, and had it not been for Earl, it probably would have. So, Earl, we appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Would anyone else like to say anything?
Yeah, I would just like, I don't think I could ever add to what Earl said. And I think we all say it up here at this table all the time, how proud we are of the 748 employees. And I can't reiterate enough how all of us look forward to the next 20 years under Jason and Brandon and Frank and Torrey and all of the new leadership team taking this organization to another level, because I, like Earl, have grandkids, and that's what it's all about. So thank you again for your legacy, Earl.
Thank you, Commissioner Granberry. I would like to make one comment. I had the privilege of having supper with Mr. and Mrs. Bentz last night, and hearing the stories of Janet pulling Earl out of sub-zero freezing waters numerous times. I'm not sure we shouldn't be honoring her today, because I don't think Earl would be here if it wasn't for her. So the old saying that there's a good woman behind every man, right there she is. Thank you. All right, this time, so I've already handed out the committee assignments, everyone has looked those over. And we need to read those into record. So at this time, I would like to ask Secretary Devaney to do so.
And I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman, or try to. These are your committee assignments for 2023 and 24. Wildlife Management Committee, Hank Wright, Chairman, Bill Cox, Vice Chairman, Jimmy Granberry, Chris Devaney, Wally Childress, Rhonda Moody. Fisheries Management Committee, Monty Ballou, Chairman, Hank Wright, Vice Chair, Bill Cox, Greg Davenport, Kent Woods. Boating Law Enforcement Committee, Wally Childress, Chairman, Jimmy Granberry, Vice Chairman, Stan Butt, Senior, Greg Davenport, Kent Woods. Budget Committee, Bill Cox, Chairman, Chip Saltzman, Vice Chairman, Hank Wright, Stan Butt, Jimmy Granberry. Public Information and Legislation and Communications Committee, Chris Devaney, Chairman, Stan Butt, Vice Chairman, Brad Box, Chip Saltzman, Jimmy Granberry. Retention, Recruitment, and Reactivation R3 Committee, Jimmy Granberry, Chairman, Monty Ballou, Vice Chairman, Bill Cox, Chip Saltzman, Rhonda Moody, Hank Wright. And finally, the Audit Committee, Stan Butt, Chairman, Chris Devaney, Vice Chairman, Wally Childress, Bill Cox, Brad Box. That's your, Mr. Chairman, that's your committee assignments for 23-24.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Devaney. At this time, I'd like to ask Chief of Fisheries, Mark Thurman, to come to the podium.
Thank you, Chairman Woods. Thank you, Commission. Today, we are previewing proposed amendments to Proclamation 2301, commercial take of fish and turtles. The amended sections that are going to be presented will be presented in their full paragraphs, and the changes will be highlighted in red and bold so you can see them in the context that they appear in the proclamation. The first proposed amendment is in Section 1, which deals with waters open to commercial fishing. We are proposing to allow the commercial harvest of silver carp and paddlefish from the Mississippi River from river mile 715 to 745. This section of the river has at the request of the advisory committee, we collected some fish this past winter, some silver carp and paddlefish. I'd like to take an opportunity, I don't know if he's here today, but to thank Clay Young for assisting us with the collection. He and Eric Gaines, our commercial fishing coordinator, were out there this winter collecting these samples so we could assess what the status of those fish was in terms of commercial harvest. The results from the analysis, from that we determined that silver carp and paddlefish do not meet or exceed the levels for consumption advisories. So we are recommending that those sections be opened for those two species. We also took this opportunity to make some housekeeping changes, some punctuation, some wording changes, and you can see them in red as well, and they're just housekeeping items. The next amendment is in Section 3, which defines commercial gear. If you recall, at the February commission meeting, we had a request to open up Pickwick Lake to the use of 5-inch mesh gill nets. We took that recommendation. You guys advised us to take a look at it. We did that and have, through our in-house consultation, we determined that we can do that without any kind of consequences, and that'll allow for more efficient harvest of silver carp in Pickwick Lake. Those fish in Pickwick are on average larger. They're in lower densities than in Kentucky Lake or Barkley, but they're a little larger, and this will help with getting those fish out of there. That concludes the preview of proposed amendments for Proclamation 2301. Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Chief. Do we have any questions from the Fisheries Committee? I think this is informational only, so no. But questions, Commissioner Wright?
Mark, if you could go back to, I think your previous slide. So it says that McKellar Lake, Lucihatchee River, and the Wolf River embayment are closed. Are those because they are below mile number 745 or 715? I guess it would be. Are they below that where that starts?
I'll have to look into that.
But those remain closed, correct?
No, the
McKellar Lake.
intention was to open those areas up and allow access to it, but I'll double check on whether that opens those sections up, and we'll have that cleared up before we bring it to a vote next month.
Any other from the committee?
Hey, I got it. I would like to thank Mark and his guys for working on this, and I'd especially like to thank Chuck. You can pass along T-Deck for working with the Fisheries guys to get this done. Because it's been going on for 30 years that I think it's been closed down there. So thank the guys for working with us.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Any comments from the full commission? Any comments from the public? Questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is related to non-resident commercial fishing license caps. Also at the February meeting, there was a request made to the commission to consider caps on non-resident commercial fishing licenses. The commission asked us to look at this. We did that. We started out by looking at what states around us were doing in terms of caps on non-resident licenses. And all the states that we looked at, border states, and then included Illinois because their programs and challenges with invasive carp are so similar to ours, do not have limits. The only state that did was Arkansas, and they don't sell any non-resident commercial fishing licenses. We've had a lot of discussion internally with agency leadership, with fisheries staff, and really don't feel like at this time we have a need to institute a cap on non-resident commercial fishing licenses. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the Fisheries Committee about the non-resident license sales? Any from the full commission? Any from the public? Thank you so much, Chief Thurman.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Wildlife Chief Joe Benedict, please come to the podium.
Try that again. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you. In following Mark's presentation, we'll be showing a preview of the 23-24 hunting and trapping seasons. I want to start with a reminder of how the hunting seasons are set. It's nearly a year-long process. We start with the hunting seasons. Our staff collect data. We take public comments for a couple different periods in there. We take input from the commission. We have a lot of survey data. Y'all have seen surveys. You've heard from us, the surveys that we're sending out to our public, members of the public. We compile those data, have internal agency meetings, including with the director, the executive staff, to run our recommendations through them. We come to this meeting As a preview, we come to the next month's meeting. We'll ask you for consideration of the recommendations in a formal manner to take votes. And then after that, we prepare the hunting guide. So it's a long process. I want to thank my staff and the officers and general counsel for their help this year in season setting. It's a labor of love. We all have passions. We're out there hunting and fishing ourselves, and we bring all that to bear here on this season setting process. Just a reminder again that we do take public comment. We take it year round. We compile that at certain periods for this kind of effort here. There's an email address. I'll show that at the very end as well. We will gladly accept public comment after this meeting up until sometime in mid-April to get ready for the next commission meeting. Here's a summary, kind of a summary of the comments we received. We received almost 300 comments by email. That's kind of a normal average number that we would get. Many on deer and CWD. You can see the numbers there with some summaries, antler point restrictions and buck limits, some support for our CWD actions, several that disagree with the season delay. Waterfowl, we had a good slug of packages, which we'll bring forward today. Some manner and means, some recommendations to change muzzleloader season to a more of a primitive weapon season. We get those comments usually every year. We have for the last couple years anyway. Another one that always comes up: predator hunting at night. Specific WMA requests. Some requests around wild hogs, and to allow hunting. And you know, we don't allow hunting with hogs are not a game species, and so they're kind of a special category. We'll touch them later in the presentation. Obviously, some other miscellaneous topics, and the one that Commissioner Woods had sent to me, I think a lot of folks got the email, including the regular email. The last bullet there was leave the seasons alone and stop changing the regulations and simplify them. So if that's possible, we're looking into that every year. How can we simplify and make regulations consistent across the state? So again, just to remind you, we started sharing this summary of the public input. We ask hunters what they like, what they prefer, what their attitudes and opinions are on various topics. You'll recall several years ago, I think this is our third year, that we have an annual kind of a harvest and effort questionnaire that we send to hunters. Many states do this. We started doing this primarily to get the effort. We'll share slides here in a minute of our harvest summaries, and without the effort, we don't really know what, if you have twice as many people hunting and twice as many animals harvested, what does that mean, right? If you know the effort, you can put things in perspective. We also did for several years hunter and trapper questionnaire. I think that was 3 years. We're kind of looking at that now to see what period we might need to continue that. We're also doing deer and turkey stakeholder attitude and opinion survey. So what do folks think about recommendation management options that we have? What do they think about the populations in there? And then what are their preferences moving forward? So really good engagement with the public on these questionnaires. Again, many of you submitted questions. You called myself or some of my staff, the director's office, and shared input. Thank you for that in this process. So what I have for you today are several proclamations with recommended changes. You see them listed there: big game, migratory game birds, the WMA proclamation, manner and means of hunting, which is typically a law enforcement proclamation. I'm going to share the preview with you today for that, just for the sake of time. And also the statewide non-protected wildlife. That's the proclamation that relates to hogs. Other proclamations that we consider each year would be the small game proclamation and then the fur bearer proclamation. So we have no recommendations for those, so I'll just share those here in this slide. So the next series of slides, move to bear, move to deer, move to turkey. There are 2 recommendations for elk that we'll share with you, again, as a preview today. This is the harvest from last year, the elk harvest. You can see the numbers there. The folks that didn't shoot their all the potential animals were the archery hunters. 7 hunters killed 4 bulls, so a few archery hunters were not successful. I did hear that I believe each of those other folks had a chance, had a shot at elk. So another good year for elk harvest here in Tennessee. Here, this slide is a little bit busy. We've got the actual number of animals harvested above the bar graph there. And you'll note that we started with 5 permits, moved to 6, moved to 11, and moved to 15. We have a proposal to increase that with some new areas for this year. You can see that this past year with the harvest of 12, we've matched our other previously high elk harvest number there. I'll just let this sit for a minute. These are some of the successful hunters. Lots of good bulls. I'd be proud to take any of those animals there. So getting into the proposed changes for elk, the current elk zones are on the right. You'll notice we have 8 zones. We have a 7 north and south, so that makes 2 there. We issue 15 permits. We're going to recommend adding 2 elk hunt zones and then an archery and gun permit for each of those. So that'd be 4 total new permits, bringing the total to 10 elk hunt zones and 19 permits. And that would be in effect for fall of 24. So the Ed Carter track, we've got unit 7 would become 7 north and south would become 7, 8, and 9. We'd allow 2 new permits for that zone 9 there, as you can see. In the Sunquist unit, we've talked about this, I believe it was last year. This area has kind of scattered populations, and our staff went out and looked at some trail camera surveys and other work to make sure there was enough there to have a successful hunt. So there, we will close the area in red. You'll see the star there. That's the elk viewing tower. It'll be a safety zone around there. And we'll add 2 new permits, 1 archery, 1 gun for that new unit. The last piece for elk and for the big, some interest in changing the youth elk hunt to align fall break. And so Brad Miller, or Dr. Miller, our elk program coordinator, looked at, I think it was 7 or 8 counties around there. I can't remember the number. And really, if we just flip the gun in the youth hunts, the timing of those hunts, that would align the youth hunt with the fall break and allow those kids to be able to hunt during the week, not just on a weekend or have to skip school for that. So I think that'll be a welcome change by those hunters. So just a summary rather, add 2 new elk zones, add 4 elk permits to align with those zones, and then align the youth hunt with the fall break. So that's the recommendations that we have for the big game proclamation, only elk. I'll move now into bear management. Well, again, there's no proposed changes here. I'll show you the harvest summary. The number of bears harvested this year was 661. It looks like it's in our top 3. Over the last 5 years, we were at 41%. That's right around the target number and the percentage we've been at, I think, for every year of the hunt that we've had it. So healthy population and the harvest is right in line with what we'd want for that. And you'll see if you look at 5-year average, we're about 20 animals higher than that average. Again, as usual, most of our bear harvest comes with hound, 17% with archery. Those are some brave folks to get that close to a bear. Lots of skill involved in that as well. And then in the number of rifle hunters, which are be still hunters there. And this is a 5-year average. Last year, you all passed a recommendation that we presented to make this tooth submission mandatory for hunters. This is the way we age the animals, and there's some other health indications that we can do when we look at the teeth. We have 372 teeth submitted from last year. It's improved from about 10% to 56%. So that was a huge jump in mandatory. We're hopeful that as this new requirement, this mandatory requirement, it goes into effect a few more years, that number will go up. We're also sending reminder letters to these hunters to remind them about this requirement. So that's good news there. Deer management, we've got harvest summaries, including unit CWD. Again, no proposed changes for deer this year. We had a really good deer harvest last year. You'll see the numbers, 1,000 more deer were harvested than the average, the 5-year average. You can see antlered in blue, antlerless in red. Again, the statewide buck harvest, we've shown you this graph for a number of years since you all reduced the buck limit. I believe that was in 2014. The dotted lines there, the yearling and the fawn harvest is dropping off. Here's that people are more selective in their buck harvest. And the 2.5, 3.5, and 4.5-year-old plus animals have a slight increase in their trajectory. So this is really headed in the right in the right way for, what we want for our harvest. And again, I think folks are happy with where the deer herd is. Reported harvest in unit CWD, an increase as well in this unit, up about, 5,000 from the 3-year average. We did have, you all passed the season extension in unit CWD, so there's about 2 more weeks of hunting after the youth season there. You'll note in the bottom right-hand corner, about 2,500 deer were harvested during that period. We can't say that the increase in harvest in unit CWD was directly from that, but again, we know that those deer were harvested during that period. Remember, overall, the entire statewide harvest was up, so that plays into effect here as well. So good news there in unit CWD. You recall the harvest incentive programs that we have in unit CWD, replacement buck. If a hunter shoots a CWD positive deer, we give them another buck. You can see the numbers there. The Fight CWD incentive programs, we have 2 different programs. If a hunter harvests a positive CWD deer, we give them a voucher through the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Foundation for a processing for their next deer. You can see we redeemed about 161 of those this year. There may be some more coming in as those processors give us those invoices. And then 82 annual sportsman licenses were provided as part of that other incentive as well. Earned bucks, we had almost over 3,500 earned bucks this year. Most hunters, and that was if you shot 1 deer and had it tested, you would get an earned buck. You can see there's about 1,500 people that received 1 earned buck and several more that received more than even more than 4 in some cases. So again, this shows the success of these programs. We're harvesting more deer in unit CWD, which is the goal, to reduce the population and try to reduce prevalence and slow the spread of the disease. Test results. This, my staff, the CWD field staff, really deserve a great shout out here as well. We sampled over 20,000 animals for CWD this year. This breaks our record from last year, over 20,000. And you'll recall we have the risk-based surveillance in each county throughout the entire state, and that is to try to find prevalence at a very, very, very early stage in new counties should it occur. We have a few counties left to get a few more animals there. We're going to continue to work on that. Our sampling year doesn't actually end until the end of June. So our sampling year for quotas, CWD animals, is the same as our fiscal year, even though the bulk of that collection occurs during hunting season. You'll see of those 20,000, we had almost 800 positive deer. Looking down at the next bullet there, the core area, which is really just 2 counties, Fayette and Hardeman County, 4,000 samples. We had most of the positive animals were taken in those counties. CW sampling times. This is something that the commission and the directors have encouraged us to reduce this turnaround time and try to make this better for our hunters. This is a great number. I'm really pleased with where our staff have gotten to this point. They've critiqued and analyzed and tried to find shortcuts, not in the quality of information, but how they process these samples. Region 1 this year, on average, which included turnaround time for the average hunter turnaround time, was just over 9 days. So that's from the time of harvest until they get their results. So that's a remarkable number that may be the best in the country. I don't know, but that's a really low number. Region 2 is at 13.5. And just another piece to remember, when we do our samples, when we send them to the lab, we ask the lab to prioritize Region 1 samples, obviously because that's where CW is. And as y'all recall, last year, Alabama had a positive. They're up to 3 positives now, just below our border in Region 2. So Region 1's a priority. Region 2 is our second priority for the lab turnaround time. And then Region 3 and 4, they're about 2.5 weeks or so as well. So this is great results here. Just a reminder, I think we have shared a graph last year with you about how the samples move throughout the process. I just have this up here, perhaps for the new commissioners or members of the public. There's a little time lag from when someone shoots a deer until they get it to us, whether they drop it off at a processor or a taxidermist. Sometimes there's a day or two, a couple days in there. There's a little bit of time in the freezer. Excuse me. Our staff go twice a week in unit CWD in Region 1 and Region 2 to pick those samples up. So we're trying every few days to collect those samples. During really opening a muzzleloader, opening a gun, Thanksgiving, Christmas, some of those holidays, we have a huge demand. But beyond that, most of those samples are processed within a day or two. We get them out to the lab. The lab testing, that's no control over. Again, during the Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays, opening day of the rifle seasons, those labs are really at full capacity for other states. And so a delay in those opening weekend periods because of that demand across the country. And again, as soon as we get those results, we're reaching out to those hunters immediately, essentially. And so again, kudos to our staff for this quick turnaround time. And we might be able to improve that, but I think it's a pretty good number where we're at now. This is a slide I've been waiting to share with y'all. So this is the known extent of CWD as of March this year. You'll see the pink counties are positive. The orange counties there are high risk. You'll note Wayne County in Region 2 is high risk, again, because of Alabama. Commissioners, we have no new CWD counties this year. So of the 20,000 animals we sampled, we did not find a new county with CWD. So that's a great thing to celebrate. And I'll remind us all, Dr. Grove, our state wildlife veterinarian, who came to us a few months before we found CWD and has been with us the entire time. He said it would take 5 or so years for us to find the extent of CWD in Tennessee. We found CWD in very high concentrations, unlike most states in the country that found CWD. You all remember those meetings where we had 10 plus samples that were positive initially. So I think we're kind of at the 5-year period. This is good news for us, good news for the hunters of Tennessee. And just happy to celebrate that with you. CWD prevalence, we, again, Fayette and Hardeman County, the core areas. Hardeman County went up a little bit this year. It's to be expected that the density of positive animals in those counties is very high. And so the spread occurs, among animals there. We also have a couple of counties that are between 1% and 2%. They're listed there. That's southwest part of the state, just west of Fayette and Hardeman County. And then we wanted to share this information with you a little differently than we have in the past. There's several counties here, you can read them, that are kind of north of Fayette and Hardeman County that are less than 1%. So these are like 0.035 or 0.05. There's 1 or 2 samples. Some of them have, 4 or 5 samples in a county that are positive. So those are just very small levels. We're happy about that. We're doing some, targeted removal in those areas. Again, trying to reduce the deer population there with our seasons. Did want to share with you, again, there's no changes recommended for deer seasons. These are the dates for the 23 and 24 season. I'll just pause there and let folks take a look. The dates are just corrected for the calendar for this year. All right, moving on to turkey management. Before I show you the harvest summary, I just wanted to remind the commission, y'all took action last year to change the turkey season. What I'm reminding us about is the harvest summary that I share has not had that change yet. The season that you proposed last year will occur in just a few weeks. We'll start that. So the harvest summaries that we'll share in a few minutes have the 3 bird bag limit and the season that started on the Saturday closest to April 1st. And again, this year, for folks that want a reminder here as we approach turkey season, last year y'all passed a 2-week delay. So this year, turkey season will begin on April 15th, and it'll go through the May 28th, and a reduction from 3 to 2 birds and only 1 of Jake. And again, commissioners, we have no changes proposed for the year following. So self-reported spring turkey harvest, just under 30,000 birds. That's a little bit below our long-term average, but remember we had the COVID bump. And so that bump pushed the average up a little bit. So again, we're keeping 30,000 has kind of been our average. If you look throughout that last number of 10 years plus, we're kind of continuing to stay in line with that. I want to share with you some new numbers that we're gathering and looking at. We've talked about harvest effort previously in the slide about getting the effort and harvest summary from our hunters. Again, we mentioned that, if you double your harvest without any effort information, you won't know what to make of that. But if you doubled your number of hunters and your hunter effort and your harvest, you kind of expect that, and really there's nothing to worry about. So here you'll notice in blue is 2020. It was the COVID year. the number is up, 725,000 hunters, 100 days rather, in the woods. So that's a good number. 2021 was down a little bit. 22 is back up a little bit. So again, these are the number of individual hunting days. So if you hunted 5 days, got our survey, and you put 5 days in there, that would be included in this graph here. Harvest rate. This is it's a little confusing graph there. If you look on the left, so if you look at 2020, the turkey harvested per days is 0.12. Another way to think about that would be for every 100 turkey hunting days, we would kill 12 birds. So that's the rate. That's how long it takes, how hard it is, how difficult it is to encounter a turkey and harvest that. And so that was a COVID year. If you look at 2021, the harvest rate was higher. So hunters had better success, a higher harvest rate. And if you look back at the left in 2021, in the hunter effort, we had less effort, but a higher harvest rate. So what that tells us is hunters are more successful even though they went a shorter time, fewer number of days in that year. So this is something that we're going to continue to look at and report to you all. The harvest rate is really one thing we want to look at. If we're bumping around between 10 and 12 and 14, and all of a sudden the harvest rate, it goes way low, that tells us something, right? Because it's based on, it's sort of corrected for the effort data along with the harvest. Turkey seasons, again, these are the seasons that we're proposing for this fall. You can see the dates there, and then next spring, which is 24. No changes, just calendar date corrections. Migratory game bird and waterfowl, so ducks and coots, geese, these all have to fall within the federal frameworks, as you all know. They're only corrected for the calendar date changes this year. I do want to share with you the January 31st closure for duck season, what that looks like. And our recommendation is the same as last year. And so we'll share that and then share some other options just so you'll see some possible other structures of that season. We do have a recommendation for Sandhill Crane. We've received several comments over the last couple of years wanting to apply as a group, as a party. And so we're going to recommend that crane hunters be allowed to apply as a party with a maximum party size of 5. So this is the season. Again, no change from last year, just a calendar date change for the duck season. You'll see that the scaup, we have a hybrid scaup season. That, again, it's the same as last year. We just put that up there for your convenience. Youth waterfowl days are very important days for the youth. The 2 Saturdays following the end of the regular duck season. And we have the veteran and active military personnel waterfowl hunting days, the 2 Sundays following the last day of regular duck season. This, I think we may have shared this in previous years with you. So this is the calendar. The green are the days that we're proposing for waterfowl season this year. You'll note in November, we have 2 days. It's the Saturday and Sunday after Thanksgiving. That's our traditional opening period. Our hunters have told us for years, really, they want to hunt as late as possible. And so late and straight is the term they use. They want the opening weekend, and then they want to go late and straight. So you recall this past year, we had a very similar structure to this, but this would end on January 31st, and it would begin 58 days later on December 5th. So that's the recommendation. I think last year we opened on a Monday and closed on a Tuesday, perhaps. So this would open on a weekday, close on a weekday, but end on January 31st. We'd hunt to the very end of the federal frameworks. It's 9 weekends for that season. Again, that's the current structure we have. One other option that we wanted to share with you would be to continue to close on January 31st, but take those days in the circle there. Jamie calls them hanging days. I think that's a neat way to say that. We could move those days, which would allow us to start on Saturday, December 9th. We could move those days to follow those 2 opening days. They'd both be weekday hunting. And again, if we did hear some feedback from hunters that missed having an opening day to the second second phase on a Saturday. They didn't really like to have it open on a Tuesday or Wednesday. So this would be an alternative for you to consider. It remains at 9 weekends. it remains January 31st closure. And one thing I forgot to mention, it does provide a 2-day rest period before the youth season. So that's something we want to keep in mind. And a third option is really what we used to have before the federal framework changed to January 31st. So this keeps our 2-day opening on weekend, and then it starts, it would end on the last Sunday in January, and you'd back up 58 days, which always starts on a Saturday. So this is a season we had for a long time before the season was extended to January 31st. So this would actually get you one more weekend. So this is 10 weekends. Again, you're going to lose those few days at the end of January. This does allow a longer split. So if you all wanted to change to this season, it would allow a 5-day split before youth season every year. And we know that hunters that don't take youth, they're going to go to their blinds. They're going to be, shuttling things back and forth. 5 days would give them more time to do that, and then allow those ducks to rest again before that first youth hunt. So again, the agency's recommending no changes. I'm going to go back. If I can go this way. This is a recommendation that we have for you, just updated for the calendar this year. I'm going to jump through 2 slides here. Is there any questions on that? Happy to address those or wait till the end. Okay.
Any questions here midstream while it's fresh on everyone's mind? Everything to this point. Go ahead, Commissioner Cox.
Thank you. I asked, and Joe, you may or may not, or maybe Jason, somebody, I asked about closing ATV use during the elk hunts. I've gotten several people complain about hunting and ATVs ride through their hunting area. And that doesn't seem to me like that ought to happen. Is that possible to do that? Can we control that? For somebody that,
Commissioner Cox, we followed up on that, and it is not closed during that time. It is still open. And I called John Mike to the podium, but whenever I talked to the manager, they did not have any instances that they really knew where it had interfered with the harvest of an elk. I think they had received some complaints that people just talked about the noise was some interference, but they didn't think it had really inhibited somebody from actually harvesting a bull.
well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, happy to have John to comment more. He'll have a better understanding than I will of that.
I've just gotten, for multiple years, some of the guys that guide up there talk about it's a problem. If you're set up on an elk and you're calling an elk, and they may go on in the future and kill one, but they might not. So I just wondered, does it just seem like to me if it's not a mountain to climb for those elk hunts, nobody wants a four-wheeler riding through their setup. Something that I brought up last year that I don't think the small game proclamation's open, but just to put it out on the public record for the public and the commission, is year-round raccoon season that may or may not come up next when we approve this. Also, the changes we made, and Joe, I'll ask your comment on this. We made reducing the bag limit and delaying the season 2 weeks on turkeys. The preliminary data, my understanding is that it's not something they recommended. And I think we took away opportunity for no good scientific reason. And that may come up. So, and I talked to Joe about it, so you can give your input on that, because I know that's a little more. It seemed like to me predators are the bigger problem, and I don't like taking away opportunities. So you might comment on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. Yes, sir. So the agency last year had no recommended changes for turkey season. We do have preliminary data, and I'll use that word intentionally, from the Turkey Research Project in lower middle Tennessee. So we had counties that we did move the season back 2 weeks and those that we didn't. So we had a really good treatment and a control that wasn't changed. The preliminary data from those counties, again, which is not statewide, we've not had the statewide season yet, indicate that that the effect of delayed season didn't affect the reproduction for the following year. Again, it's preliminary data. We don't have that finalized yet, but there didn't seem to be an indication in those 1 or 2 years where a delayed start had an impact on those factors that Dr. Bueller shared that had reduction in the reproductive success. So number of eggs, poult survival, those factors that are down, 5 to 10% in each of those life stages, delaying the season didn't have an effect on that we were able to see. Again, it's preliminary.
Thank you. And my last thing is, I had someone ask me why juvenile deer season is 2 days. Could it be a week instead of 2 days at the end of the season? I said, I don't know why we did that, but that's just what it's always been. So I'm putting that out there just for information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Butt.
Thank you, Chairman Woods. For the last several years, if you noticed when you first slide about hunters asking for privilege of landowners to have weapon of choice after bow season, and speaking with Deputy Director Brandon Weir, then I think that's under consideration to study, but there's no recommendation for that. But I've also had 2 in my district, and there were 9 requests that the 2 from my district were handicapped, physically challenged hunters who would like for the agency to consider a special permit for them to be able to use weapon of choice after bow season. And so in speaking with Counsel Grimes and Deputy Director Weir, as well as you, Chief Benedict, and with, if it pleases Chairman Woods and Committee Chairman Wright, then I would like to request that the agency look into the possibility of developing a permit before our guide goes to print. Maybe something that we could vote on in April to allow that if need be, or if that permit could be provided for those 6, 8, 10, 12, however many handicapped, physically challenged hunters, that they would be able to have a weapon of choice. So particularly one that asked me, said, if I have to use a muzzleloader during muzzleloader season, I have to push it up on a tree and push in all the things that go with it. And so I'm just asking for consideration from the agency to see if possible that we could develop a permit for those who might request that. And then as you do your research down the road, then that would be left up to the agency as far as whether they want to consider that statewide or not, if that would be appropriate at this time.
So just to clarify that, you're asking the agency to look into the possibility of allowing certain disabled folks the ability to get a special permit to hunt with any weapon type after archery.
And landowners, they have to be landowners.
Only landowners.
Yeah.
We can look at that.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner Woods.
Mr. Benedict, 2 things. One, you've done a great job of creating these new elk zones. I like that. Why would you not go ahead and implement that in 23 instead of 24?
Yeah, that's right. The permits have already been drawn for that.
What's that?
The permits have been drawn for that. They were drawn just a couple weeks
already
ago.
drawn for it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. That's
Thank you,
simple.
Mark.
Could you go back to the duck screen opening days and whatnot and show us one more time what you're recommending?
So thank you. Yes, sir. The agency recommends the same season that we had last year that y'all passed, which is the 2 days in November. It's on the screen here, ending on the 31st of January, and then backing up the remaining of the season, which is 58 days. So it would start on a Tuesday and end on a Wednesday. That would meet the public input that we receive. People want to hunt as late as they can.
You good with that?
We're having a little discussion here between the waterfowlers and the heathens that don't duck hunt.
Out of line.
Who's in that category? Can you qualify that statement?
You know who you are. So really the goal on the waterfowl is what? More weekends or less pressure?
What the goal for
Later days.
right?
Okay, so pressure and weekends were not part of the conversation?
Not for the statewide season.
Okay, I'm just asking. You like that.
So, Joe, there's a lot of ways to manipulate the calendars and the dates, and you've got some restrictions. You can only have one split. I'm curious, as I guess I fall into the non-waterfowl heathens that Commissioner Saltzman was referring to, but if you try to satisfy everybody and you back the 58 days in late and straight and go backwards, if you had one of those days on that second weekend, which would be the 2nd of December, and that's your starting date, then ended on the 29th in January, it seems to be that would kind of give you a half of a weekend in that first weekend. But more importantly, and I've just asked the question, how important is it to have 4 days of rest before those youth weekends instead of just 2? Because if you're talking about the people that aren't doing the youth that are cleaning out their blinds on that February 1st and 2nd before the youth weekend, there's going to be a lot of activity of them getting their equipment, their stoves and whatnot out. So then what you're trying to promote is youth, success. And so they go in there on those days and, the ducks hadn't rested because the boats are coming and going and all during the middle of the day. So I would just, kind of satisfies half of that first weekend instead of the whole weekend. You go to the 29th, which, is almost to the 31st, but then you have the 4 days, the 30th, 31st, 2nd, and 3rd for rest for the youth weekend, which is so important to get the youth. I know Commissioner Childress is, the greatest about taking youth and having great success on those youth, in those days on those youth weekends. So that's just a thought. I don't know.
And I would take in consideration, especially for Commissioner Childress and the West Tennessee bunch, is to take a look at Arkansas's break, Kentucky's break, Missouri's break, because if we're breaking at the same times, you don't get birds moving as much. And obviously, if they're hunting when we're on a break, they're going to come this way. And I think the hunters will be interested as when the Kentucky break is, because most of these hunters have multiple license in multiple states and they hunt our break in another state and vice versa. So I don't know if there's been any overlay on the other states when their breaks are.
I haven't looked at that.
A good point, though.
Jamie might have. We'll certainly look into that.
Yeah. Right. And for all the heathens out there, we'll baptize you next year.
Okay. What, Joe, one other question back to the turkey. So 4 years ago when we did the season setting and we added those 4 counties in the south part of the state to the 2-week delay. So we're just now starting to see the results. We also added the 4 or 6 counties on the Mississippi River. That had a lot more to do with flooding than part of the turkey study. Coming from Roger and staff, there was a lot of debate about the 2-week delay and how beneficial that would be. And that had a big impact on me, influencing me to accept what you were recommending. And it now seems like we're kind of going the other way, saying that the 2-week delay that we imposed last year based on what we thought was science is not part of the equation. So can you comment on that just for my personal edification?
Sure. So, when we look at the Southeast United States, there's a Southeast Turkey Study Group. There's some researchers in that group, university professors that think the 2-week delay, is a meaningful thing. And so there's studies beyond Tennessee, I believe, that are looking into that. The agency didn't recommend any change last year. We would have kept that lower Middle Tennessee 2-week delay. We wanted to use those last couple of years of the research project to see if Tennessee data would make sense, and then come to the commission with that information for any consideration of moving a statewide season. So I guess at this point, our recommendation is no change. Again, we just have preliminary data from those lower Middle Tennessee counties. And if you made a change next month to change the turkey season back, we would do that. You all would do that without even having a 2-week delayed season. We don't have information on that season yet.
This one season, but not two.
Right. But you'd make the change before we had the season, I guess. So just thinking about the hunter, changing regulations for the hunter, our recommendation again is that no change now. We'll get this, finalize the research project, look at those lower Middle Tennessee counties, get the final results from that, and then come back to you, share those, and then any kind of recommendations we have at that point.
But you're not recommending any changes because the commission voted last year to make that change. So you're not going to come back and go against what the commission asked you to do last year. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So just to push back a little bit, if you don't have the scientific knowledge and it's going to be 2 years before you get it, I don't see why we need to take opportunity away from the hunters. And you're not going to confuse a turkey hunter when season opens.
So explain to me, you're not shortening the season.
I'm going to be honest with you. You could take 2 weeks off the back end and move it to April 1st like it was.
So then you would be taking opportunity away.
Nobody hunts in the May. So,
Not necessarily.
but I mean, I wouldn't do that. I'd just slide it back like it was because I think we took away opportunity that wasn't justified and lowered the bag limit.
But we didn't reduce the length of the season.
No, but you took away the best part.
Any other? We'll let you finish and then we'll end up to everyone for comment. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So moving on to Sandhill Cranes, I will share this picture of this young man on the left that may or may not have the same last name as me. Was pleased this year. He was one of the successful crane hunters. In fact, that's his first bird there. We had about 4,500 folks apply for tags. We issued 500 tags, but that's 2 per person. So 1,250 folks got tags. About 70% reported hunting. So that's a good number. That number has changed, I think, over time a little bit. I think it's growing. 604 range is the total number harvested. And I'll just pause and let you, there's a lot of different stats with you, what Jamie put together. Most folks harvested 2 cranes. Most of them were adults. Most of them were in the Southeast Crane Zone, which is where the bulk of the birds winter here. And most were on private land as well. So here are the seasons for next year. Again, no change, just to change the calendar dates. At the bottom, you'll note that you see that note that we are going to recommend allowing party applications or group applications. A few changes on our WMAs that we're going to bring to you for action in April. You'll see there's several WMAs that we have some small regulation changes there on the left, including a new hunt at Milan Arsenal, which is here in West Tennessee, and also some Buffalo Ridge hunts. Again, we're standing on that ground right now. We'd like to establish 2 new refuges and some hunts on one of them. And then we've got to repeal 1 WMA the property was sold. So we'll run through those quickly. So we want to align American woodcock season with rabbit season on Bridgestone Firestone. And this is actually a housekeeping piece. We forgot to do that last year. And so we want to do that this year. This will align the disturbance on that quail focal area to just 3 days a week for all those different types of hunting. Similarly, on Wolf River WMA, we want to align the dog training season with rabbit season. And really this would result in a couple month reduction in dog training season, again, on the quail focal area to reduce that disturbance in the fall. Another thing we want to do at Wolf River is to reestablish quota hunts. We had quota hunts a number of years ago, very successful. A lot of overcrowding issues there. We're getting comments and complaints from the hunters. So we're going to have 2 hunts per week. You'll see there, 25 hunters per hunt. one bearded bird, and it counts towards your statewide bag. So the entire season will be open during those. Those hunts will occur during the entire statewide season. Milan Arsenal, we used to hunt this property a number of years ago. The Tennessee National Guard recently acquired this property, control of this property, and they reached out to us and said, boy, we'd like to have these hunts back. So it's about 15,000 acres in Gibson County. There's a rough map there on the right side. We are going to recommend establishing 12 deer hunts. These are 2 or 3 day hunts and 4 turkey hunts. This would not be for this year, but next year, spring of 24. We're going to try something different here. You see the map, there's these different units, and they're military-based units. There's roads and things for training that they have. We're going to establish quotas for each of those areas. So on those 65 hunters that get drawn for a deer hunt, we'll divide them up into those areas based on the type of habitat there to try to provide a better quality habitat or hunt and allow people to spread out a little bit more. So it's a neat thing we're going to try here in the coming years. So these will all be new hunts that we add to our quota hunt system. I'll start at the bottom of this slide. Y'all remember about every other year we would have a hunt. That was a hunt for warriors at the Enterprise South Nature Park. That was a park that had some deer population goals. They wanted to reduce deer in the park, and we helped with that Hunt for Warriors hunt. That property's been sold, and our staff have looked where can we replace that, and we're going to recommend establishing a deer hunt to kind of replace that hunt at Hiwassee Refuge. It's a Tuesday, Wednesday hunt, and many of the folks that apply for and those that run that Hunt for Warriors indicated that the weekday would be better for those folks. So this is a hunt that fits in with our other hunts at Hiwassee. It's a bonus deer. That's a refuge. We want to reduce that population and allow the food to be there for other animals as well. So this will be a new hunt. Again, we're just replacing the Enterprise South Nature Park hunt we've had. Buffalo Ridge, Unit 1, that's where we're standing now. This is the Unit 1, the original piece, I guess you could say. They're recommending Don and his staff to basically have Saturday and Sunday hunts throughout the entire turkey season. The youth season, you can see the date up there, is youth only. And then during those weekend hunts, the statewide turkey season, they're going to have youth become outdoor women and then hunts for warriors. All of those folks can participate in those hunts. So it's a great increase in opportunity here at the refuge. They also want to add guns during the ladies' bow, what used to be called muzzleloader deer hunt. And you see the dates there for this fall. Unit 2, this is a new piece of property that's just to the west. You may not be able to see the red hash mark, but it's the left side of the green there. We're sitting at the barn there where the yellow star is. So that might help orient you there. So we want to establish 3 3-day deer hunts on that property. I spent about an hour with Billy LaGrange, the manager, out there yesterday afternoon driving. It's very different habitat than Buffalo Ridge. You think about beautiful hardwoods, really good soil, lots of food plots. That ground has been timbered, and it's just very rocky. There's not a lot of topsoil. So we've established a center quota for those deer hunts as they work to manage that land and try some more huntable ground there. Since it's been harvested, it's really thick. It's good habitat for deer. It's just be hard to hunt. Really small saplings, really thick, dense cover. Crooked Creek Refuge. This is a property that Commissioner Ballou brought to our attention. It's a property we own. It's just under 600 acres in Carroll County. It's not a WMA. It's not a refuge. It's just property that we own. So it was essentially hunted with statewide seasons. And the request was to make it a waterfowl refuge. And so we've looked at that, and we will recommend that become a waterfowl refuge. All of our waterfowl refuges across the state have a similar closure, November 15th through the end of February. We're still waiting for final verification that the deed allows us to allow public access. If in fact we can, which we think we can, we're going to allow small game hunting outside of those refuge closure dates. So we'll just close it for the waterfowl season. So that's Crooked Creek Refuge. The Alvin C. York WMA, I didn't really even know that we had this. I'll just confess that. This is a proclamation, a property that we've had since 1990. You can see by the proclamation number there. It's in Fentress County. It's owned by Department of Energy. I think that's what that is. Education. I'm sorry. That's right. So it's a school, and they have a big land base. And so we've been able to use part of that property as a hunting area, WMA. They're going to expand. It's a good thing they're doing. It's a neat thing. They're expanding their agricultural and forestry work for the kids in the school, and they kind of want us off the property so they can do that throughout the year, throughout the fall and school year. So we'll be repealing that proclamation and absolving that WMA, if that's the correct word, at their request. Odie Mills Refuge. This is up in the northeast part of the state, just south of Cumberland Gap there. You'll see the area in red, we expect to, by this fall, have a conservation easement on those 2,500 acres in red. You'll see there. We just completed purchase, or we soon will wrap up the purchase of the Asher tract, that little green one to the left of the red, to the west there. That's about 800 acres. So we want to proclaim the entire area as Odie Mills Refuge. And on the Asher tract, we're going to establish some hunts for this year. We can't do any hunts on that conservation easement because we won't have it yet. So this will be that smaller track. Again, because it's a small area, we're recommending 3 deer hunts with 400 quota, and then spring turkey season. The recommendation here is for the turkey season to have an adult and a child or a youth hunt. So you've got to have a child with you, or a youth rather, to hunt during that season. And then small game would be same as statewide. Manner and means of hunting. This is a law enforcement proclamation. I just thought I'd share it with you today to save some time. They're recommending that we clarify some rules of the weapons allowed by adults during youth deer hunts. So the italic language there, I believe, is what will be in the proclamation that you'll see as a red line in your packet for next month. But I'll just read it. Prohibit adults using centerfire or muzzleloading rifles to hunt fur bearers during the young sportsman deer and bear hunts. So we don't want adults hunting with centerfire rifles with kids that are hunting deer while they're hunting fur bearers. There's also the last bullet there. We were made aware of some changes when the proclamation. We regulated the urine-based deer sense, because there's a chance that you could have CWD prions in that. What we used, I guess I'll switch to this here. What we used this time was the Archery Trade Association, or the ATA. Their verbiage. So you'll see on that code red, deer urine scent, this DP, it's DPP on the bottom. That used to be ATA. So when ATA, when Responsible Hunting Association came up with their deer protection program, the ATA kind of allowed them, or I guess the word diverted to them, I can't think of the right word here, to their program. And it's the same language we had before. They've added a few clauses in there. So it won't have any effect on deer hunters. We'll look for the DPP logo on those hunting products. Again, it's kind of a cleanup thing that most folks won't even recognize. So this is the final piece we have to share with you. In the non-protected wildlife and species deemed destructive proclamation, we have some changes regarding wild hogs that we wanted to clean up. This is a cleanup thing. There's a clause in there when this proclamation was passed that allowed folks that had a lease between 2011 and 2014. Those folks were authorized to do hog removal. So we strike that language for a very long time, allowing landowners to declare designees. And so that was in a SOP internally. And so we've moved that to the proclamation. As far as what I believe is, it's the same process that we've been using. So if a landowner has up to 1,000 acres, they can designate 10 landowners, and this is in each calendar year. If you have more than 1,000 acres, you can add additional designees for every 100 acres. So again, most folks that utilize these won't notice it. We're just kind of cleaning up that proclamation. So in summary, we're going to add we're recommending in April that we add 2 elk hunt zones with 4 permits, 2 in each. Align the youth elk season with the fall break. Allow group applications for sandhill cranes. Align woodcock season and dog training on 2 WMA. New quota hunts at Mile and Arsenal. new Hunt for Warriors at Outwassee Refuge, and the new quota hunts here at Buffalo Ridge, and the additional Becoming an Outdoor Woman in here refuges, including hunts on the Asher Tract, repeal the Alvin York Institute WMA, address the allowed methods for adults. This is the address for the members of the public that would like to provide comments on these or other items between now and April 12th. We'll compile those, get those out to the commission, and consider those in the April. So thank you.
Comprehensive report. Is there any questions for the full commission? Stan?
Yes, I asked last fall, was there any discussion or consideration for allowing the fall turkey hunt to be aligned with Thanksgiving, maybe 2 days before and the day of Thanksgiving for those who wanted to harvest the turkey for Thanksgiving? And secondly, on the discussion about the deer urine, is that allowable now? Are we allowing that, or is it still a prohibition because of CWD?
The allowance that we that the commission landed on is to allow those products that are through that program. Used to be the ATA, now it's a deer protection program. Those folks in the industry, they want to be sustainable, and so those urine-based lures that have that DPP logo on them, an ATA if they're older, those are allowed.
Okay.
Commissioner Thought.
Thank you, sir.
Joe, first of all, thank you for all that. It was a lot of work, a lot of information, a lot of good information. I just had one thought on the Milan Arsenal. When we start that up, that may be a great opportunity for a Hunt for Warriors just because of where it is and what it is. And that may be great public relations for the TWRA to take the first hunt and invite veterans and maybe some people that have worked there over the years, because that was such a major employer for that area for so long. It'd be a really great opportunity for TWRA to show off and talk about this and talk about opportunities for years.
Great. The director reminded me, just for your information, there is a turkey hunt there this year for Warriors.
Okay.
Before we start our program.
But 2 bites of the apple is okay too.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the commission? Any questions from the public? Questions or comments from the public? Sure, come on up. Just state your name and keep the 3 minutes, please.
My name is Mark Rich from Hayden, Tennessee. I'd like to speak on behalf of the sportsmen of Carroll County who support the refuges of Crooked Creek. It'd be a great thing for the county, wildlife, and sportsmen, and small game, big game, waterfowl. It just be a good thing for the county and wildlife. One thing's unique about this property is that this was part of the mitigation for Lake Halford when they did the wetland deal where they could build the lake. In 2000, this land was in row crops, and now it's been set aside in natural as habitat, and it'd be great to have a place for wildlife to reside. So I thank you for your consideration for that. And as well as the duck season input, I like to split where you have the extra days for rest on your season framework. So thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We appreciate your comments and appreciate you taking the time to come.
All right, so question, you're supporting closing the season on the 29th?
I support it the 31st. You never know when you're going to have a good weather front.
Well, I understand, but when are you talking about the break that you like?
The Saturday and Sunday.
So you like Saturday and Sunday and then take a long break and open on Tuesday?
I have to agree with my wife with that.
You're
okay.
a smart man.
She would like that. That was nice this past duck season, having an extra weekend after the opener. Had a chance to kind of refrag or regroup or whatnot. So yes, I would support that part of it. Thank y'all.
All right, thank you. Anything else from the public, commissioners? Joe? All right, we're going to take a short break, 10, 12 minutes or so, and we'll reconvene with Senior Advisor Mike Bell.
White-tailed deer were a rare sight in Tennessee when the TWRA. Today, we estimate our deer population at nearly 1.6 million. But they face a growing and significant threat, chronic wasting disease. Currently, there is no cure for CWD, and the disease is 100% fatal for the animal, which threatens both the health of our wildlife population and the opportunities available for hunters. Management of CWD is complex and requires numerous long-term techniques to be applied, monitored, and adjusted over time, which is why TWRA is implementing a new 5-year CWD response and management plan. The plan includes 5 main goals: the introduction or spread of CWD to new. Number 2, surveillance and monitoring to improve detection of the disease and better track the number and location of cases. Number 3, activate management and responses to minimize the impacts of CWD where the disease has been detected and proactively respond to any new cases. Number 4, more research to optimize all of TWRA's CWD programs. And finally, number 5, outreach and communications to ensure the public and our hunters have the information they need about CWD. This new CWD response and management plan will serve as a guiding document for TWRA staff and ensure the best science is applied to our efforts to control the disease. And we want to have a whole of government approach. That's why we created this plan with the help of the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, with additional input from a wide range of stakeholders over an 18-month process. Research on animal health diseases, including CWD, is constantly evolving, so the agency plans to remain flexible and adaptable in our response to CWD, and we want to hear from you. The response and management plan will be available for public comment this winter, and the agency will host a public meeting for an in-person opportunity to discuss the plan. Will be available for public comment this winter, and the agency will host a public meeting for an in-person opportunity to discuss the plan with our biologists. Together, we can control the spread of CWD in Tennessee. For more information on CWD hunting regulations and incentives, visit cwdintennessee.com.
Logging for quail.
Today we're on the Bart Camp Barrens. Bart is one of the 4 statewide quail focus areas. We're hunting timber off of 170 acres. We're doing a lot of habitat work on the stuff that we've got, but being able to increase the usable ground requires timber harvest. The plans are to come back and burn this on a rotation. We're increasing our habitat base for quail here. Cutting trees, it's a drastic measure. But what comes back in its place is the early successional habitat that provides great quality habitat for not just quail, but for deer and for turkeys, for a whole host of songbirds, small mammals. The early successional habitat provides a larger food source, a larger habitat source than just the average forest. If you look at a topo map of Coffee County and parts of northern Franklin County, it'll have the barrens across it. And the barrens historically were early successional habitat, scrubby habitat. This landscape stays wet. The bedrock is close to the surface here, so it doesn't drain very well. But here, so it doesn't drain very well off on a regular basis. And this was a huge hunting ground historically. So what we're looking at here is an area that was cut 2 years ago. We were able to come in and burn right behind the harvest to clear up some of the log and slash and stimulate the seed bank. Everything on the right side of this mowed strip 2 years ago was trees. There was a forest. And through the timber operation, we were able to increase our early successional habitat base. You didn't put it out there? We haven't planted anything out here. That you walk outside and come back in, they'll be all over your pants. These make great quail habitat. Excellent food source. Lots of bugs on this. The invertebrates get all over it. Excellent food source for baby quail. The partridge pea, again, excellent food source for the quail, and great habitat structure underneath for a bird that makes his living hiding from everything else. This is a great place for him to get in and hide in, do his thing during the day without having to worry about overhead predators coming in. So the seeds in the seed bank. A lot of the native stuff. That stuff is there. It's in the seed bank, especially in the forested areas. If it were an agricultural field that's been farmed for years and constantly sprayed, maybe that seed bank is been depleted and it's not there. But here, when we take a forest and remove the forest and put sunlight on the ground, that seed bank responds with this. So once we've got it to this point, we'll maintain this with fire. We'll come in every 2 to 3 years with a fire rotation. We'll burn it alternating. Sometimes we'll burn it in the spring, sometimes we'll burn it in the fall. That'll keep the woody encroachment out. But we'll maintain this with fire. We're hoping to have different stages of habitat as much as possible here. Rarely do things thrive in a monoculture. If you have just forest, you're going to have some things, but a lot of the species that we have here in Middle Tennessee, the deer, the turkey, the quail, those are edge species, and they've got to have different habitat types in order to thrive. And having mature forest and having early successional fields, that's going to benefit everything.
Our next story, non-game or wildlife too. Our next story, non-game or wildlife too.
We are actually right here. We're at the foot of Short Mountain. Short Mountain is an outlier of the Cumberland Plateau. In fact, the top of the Short Mountain is the same elevation as Crossville, Tennessee. This is a unique area. There's actually Mountain Creek that runs right here, and that's part of the stream. One of the 3 water sources is where this area headwaters got its name. If you go across this ridge, water there falls and flows into the Caney Fork River. This right here, water that falls here and Mountain Creek will flow into the Collins River. Every bit of the water that falls on that side of that ridge you can see right there flows into the East Fork of the Stone. We came out today just doing a bird walk here around on Short Mountain, just local folks out of the community. Yes, that's a indigo bunting. I call these birds, when I first started knowing these birds, I call them the mountain bluebirds, but they are indigo bunting in the same family as the goldfinch. I like my little birds, and I have for a number of years. Of course, I guess I got that passion from my mother, always having bird feeders up and watching the birds come in all the time, but learning more birds that are here during the summertime that we don't see all year round. And that's many of those birds are what we were looking for today, especially many of the warblers. But I heard a wood thrush, which if you hear a piccolo playing in the woods, it's the wood thrush. Let's see if I can't get that worm-eating warbler to stick his head up. I hear a towhee out further out this way. The part of my job that I really enjoy is educating others, whether it's on wild turkey, whether it's on all this leaf, and you can see the leaves are all turkey, whether it's on trees, all this is one leaf, and you can beautiful yellow woods, a lot of carving done on it if you can get to the right size. So if I can impart some knowledge on something that I know to someone that doesn't know, or give them an appreciation of it, or why it's not a good thing to kill or to destroy a certain habitat, I do enjoy that. Snakes, many people have hurt themselves getting away from snakes. We found a small ringneck snake up there, probably the most harmless snake that we could run across today. This snakes are part of the landscape just like anything else. They have a niche to serve. To birders in general, the song is the bird. There's a very few birds out there that may sound like another, But depending on the habitat, you'll know that bird from one from another. Many of these warblers, once you see movement, if you don't get at them a good ID on them real quick, you're not going to get a good ID, especially in a dense habitat. You don't necessarily have to see that bird, but if you can hear that song and you know in your mind's eye, okay, that is a blue-winged warbler. That song is unique to that bird, so you know you've identified a blue-winged warbler when you hear his song. Here, we should see some birds down in this moving around. A day like this, satisfaction comes from getting out into something that I can have a direct effect on. The water's being made is land that's protected. It's really protected and used for hunting, but all the birds that I hear around me are using this as habitat, and this land is managed for that purpose for the game, but the non-game is such a big part of it. I can hear 10 different birds singing behind me, and they're using the same habitat that the deer and turkey use. So knowing that I'm here protecting this area or promoting this area for the use of game, but then non-game is a big part of it as well.
Our next story is about artificial bat habitat.
And our bats now that are hibernating in caves, many of them are being impacted by this. That are hibernating in caves, many of them are being impacted by this disease, white nose syndrome, and they have their young in the spring just after they emerge from their caves. And the survivors of white nose syndrome especially are stressed, and they are often in a poor health condition.
A lot of suitable natural roost trees that you do find in the woods, they're ephemeral. They last between 2 and 3 years. And once that tree becomes unusable, it may still stand, but all the bark will fall off. And so this is an alternative that provides that structure staying for an extended period of time with bark over a longer period of time than what you find on the landscape in a natural setting.
Artificial bark. So it's textured on the inside, so the bats have something to hold on to and crawl up on.
This product's called Brandon bark. It's provided by a contractor we deal with quite a bit, Copperhead Consulting in Kentucky. And this product is supposed to mimic bark of dead trees. And what happens when a tree dies, the bark itself will pop off, and we call it sloughing. And so over time it pops, it breaks, it falls off. But before it falls off, when it pops off the bole of the tree, it creates a void for the bats to get up underneath, establish a colony, and raise their young.
Our middle tenant is really a lot less older and dead trees in our forests, and those would be trees that bats like to use and like to have their babies in. And so we installed these sort of artificial dead trees out here today and give Indiana bats specifically, which are endangered species, a site that would be useful to them.
The Nature Conservancy paid for the materials, but then I managed to find another partner outside of PNC and TWRA that came in, assisted with erecting the poles and helping us put the bark on the utility poles. We're doing as much as we can in the winter when the bats are having the highest declines because of white nose syndrome. So the next step would be to provide or protect as much summer habitat. The lack of habitat can cause an added stress to bats that could further the decline when they're out spending resources looking for roost where they once were. And so that could add to the decline. So we're trying to provide more habitat in the summer.
How's that look from down there, Josh? Good. As a management tool, I think the use of this type of structure will increase over time. They've had really good success with it in other states. The bats seem to really like it, and just the bang for the buck seems to be really high.
White-tailed deer were a rare sight in Tennessee when the TWRA was founded in 1940. Today, we estimate our deer population at nearly 1.6 million. But they face a growing and significant threat, chronic wasting disease. Currently, there is no cure for CWD, and the disease is 100% fatal for the animal, which threatens both the health of our wildlife populations and the opportunities available for hunters. Management of CWD is complex and requires numerous long-term techniques to be applied, monitored, and adjusted over time. which is why TWRA is implementing a new 5-year CWD response and management plan. The plan includes 5 main overarching goals. Number 1, prevent the introduction or spread of CWD to new areas. Number 2, surveillance and monitoring to improve early detection of the disease and better track the number and location of cases. Number 3, activate management and responses to minimize the impacts of CWD where the disease has been detected and proactively respond to any new cases. Number 4, more research to optimize all of TWRA's CWD programs and find communications to ensure the public and our hunters have the information they need about CWD. This new CWD response and management plan as a guiding document for TWRA staff and ensure the best science is applied to our efforts to control the disease. And we want to have a whole of government approach. That's why we created this plan with the help of the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, with additional input from a wide range of stakeholders over an 18-month process. Research on animal health diseases, including CWD, is constantly evolving, so the agency plans to remain flexible and adaptable in our response plans so white-tailed deer remain an important feature of Tennessee's landscape and culture. Our hunters have an important role in helping manage CWD, and we want to hear from you. The CWD Response and Management Plan will be available for public comment this winter, and the agency will host a public meeting for an in-person opportunity to discuss the plan with our biologists. Together, we can control the spread of CWD in Tennessee. For more information on CWD hunting regulations and incentives, visit cwdintennessee.com.
Hey, let's learn about high-tech hog trapping.
The hog problem in Tennessee is much worse in regions 3 and 4, which is the plateau region and further over into East Tennessee. Region 2, when we started, had pockets of hogs here and there. Wayne County was a pretty large pocket. So we started here 4 years ago. I think we've come pretty good ways with it. We still have a hog problem, there's no doubt. We don't get as many calls as we used to. Damage, number one problem. Damage to people's yards, people's gardens. Any row cropper in this area of the county has damage, and they'll destroy it. They're invasive species. They don't belong here, so they don't really fit into that niche in the ecosystem. Whereas the deer and turkey, they naturally belong here. So they come in, they don't cause any problems. They just fit right into that ecosystem. And the hogs are a completely different story. So they rob all the other wildlife of food also. You know, acorns under oak trees in the fall, you know, they'll clean up a whole patch of oak trees, and then the deer come along and they don't have hardly anything to eat off of that section of trees. So those are the two main problems with them there. Trapping, in my opinion, is the best way to deal with them. Because when they come here, they get comfortable with the trap. We know they're here, we're watching them here, and they all go in, drop the gate, and you've caught, you know, 20, 30, 40 hogs versus sitting out.
I'd like to ask Senior Advisor Mike Bell to come to the podium and present public information and legislation information.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission members. We have had several bills moving through the legislature the last few weeks, and just kind of let you know, we probably have about one more month of the legislative session, and then they'll be going home for the year. Month of the legislative session, and then they'll be going home for the year. Been involved, and not just members of the staff, and many members of the commission, just about all of you, have one time or another been involved in helping us with legislation. at the Cordell Hull building, and we greatly appreciate it. They should be wrapping up in probably another 4 to 5 weeks. So I'll run through a few bills right now, a few bills that we're just not following, but bills that we brought on behalf of the agency. First was a firearms cleanup bill. I think we've mentioned this one to you before. Months ago, we started looking at our code just to see how it could be inconsistent with what the state has done in the last few years. And one of those areas was firearms. If you look at the governor's bill to create permitless carry in the state of Tennessee, we had things in our code that were not addressed in that bill that passed a couple of years ago, and that were just inconsistent. So we've got this firearms cleanup bill that passed the Senate floor yesterday. It should be on the House floor one day next week, and will make our code, the wildlife code, and where guns are allowed to be carried, consistent with what the state has done. Voting under influence. This last year, not just directly, but through our officers, that we have a few jurisdictions, I think 3 jurisdictions in the state, that were not allowing, not even permitting our officers to get a subpoena or court order for a blood draw. Now, you can do that. The rest of the jurisdictions were allowing our officers to do that. You can do that in the case of a DUI, but we had some judges in 3 districts who thought our statute was unclear, and so we brought a BUI advantage to make some other changes with it. One was just making it more consistent with the penalties of DUI, and that's something the legislature's been doing the last few years anyway. And so we've got this BUI cleanup bill that was heard in Senate Judiciary this week, is going to Finance now, and should be heard in House Criminal Justice Sub in the coming week. Next one that affects you commissioners directly, the current statute requires you to be well informed of wildlife and game and fishing. Well, we added being well informed of boating and boating operation to the statute. That has already passed both chambers and heading to the governor. That came in response to a TASER recommendation that first, the way the TASER recommendation first was proposed, that they put a member of the paddlecraft community on the commission. You commissioners know this. We don't represent specific interest groups on the commission. In fact, that would be a nightmare if we started designating positions for certain interest groups on the commission. But all of you, when you get appointed, you represent the hunters and fishermen and boaters, specifically now with this bill statewide. And so that's all that bill did. And it's passed both houses and head to the governor. We got another piece of legislation that's cleanup legislation. When I first came to work, we went through the code and just found some things that were antiquated. I've probably told most of you this before. I know we mentioned it yesterday in the meeting with the commissioners, orientation with the commissioners. There was a section of code, the section of code that deals with Reelfoot Lake, which Reelfoot Lake was given to the agency that preceded this meeting back in the 20s. Well, it's still referred to the regulation of commercial boating vessels as steam and sail. And so that was still in the code. And I think an enterprising lawyer could have argued that we didn't have the authority to regulate gasoline-powered boats if they were being used for commercial purposes on Reelfoot Lake. So we just found some things like that need to be cleaned up, and that legislation has our purposes on Reelfoot Lake. So we just found some things like that need to be cleaned up, and that legislation has already been signed by the and again, this commission directed us to tackle these issues. One was being able to use the lifetime sportsman's money that comes in each year annually instead of having to put it in our endowment fund. That bill has passed out of the House Energy and Ag, the Senate Energy and Ag Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and is now headed to the Senate floor. Should be on the floor one day next week. It's in the House full finance this next week. Now, so far, that bill in the House has received unanimous support and no questions in the 3 committees it's been heard. It's got to be heard in one more before it heads to the floor. And then in the Senate, it got 1 no vote in the Senate Finance, but it's been unanimous other than that. And I would expect that bill to pass both the House and Senate floor, in the next few weeks. Last one I want to mention, again, is one that the commission directed us to do, was to create an exception to the Wetlands Fund to purchase the upland property in Cumberland County, the Oakley Tract, that we've talked about here before. That bill has passed the Senate unanimously. It'll be in the House Finance Subcommittee this coming week. And, so far that bill has not had any questions or issues, and we'll continue to work those committee members and work the legislature to make sure those bills pass. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bell. I will say that there's been some heavy lifting on Capitol Hill so far this year. And we couldn't have done it without Torrey and Mike and all the commissioners. All the right moves were made, and all the outcomes thus far has been in favor of the agency. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would add not just Torrey, the commission, but the director staff, the other staff in the agency. We called on a lot of different people at different times. Everybody was able to come in and play a part, and couldn't done it without any of them.
Very good.
Thank
Team effort. Very good. Thank you so much. At this time, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Cox for the Budget Committee.
Mr. Tarkenton, are you in the room? There he is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, I'll be presenting the financial statement for January. And you should have in your laptop on your desk there. Slide would be the boating fund registration is less than what we had projected for the year thus far. We're about $212,000 less than what we had projected. The expense to date on the budget is approximately 34% of the annual allotment. Next slide is the wildlife slide. We're approximately $285,000 of what was projected, and we're at the 40% benchmark of the, or 40% amount of the total allotment of the expense allotment for the year. The next slide is the Wetlands Acquisition Fund. Have just shy of 20 million, 19.9 million in it. And then the last slide is the addition of our investment. Might note that the SPIF rate, State Pool Investment Fund, is at 4.25% for January. I already have the one for February, and it's a little bit higher. It's at 4.5. I already have the one for February, and it's a little bit higher. It's at 4.5. Subject to questions, that concludes my presentation.
Any questions from the committee?
Real quick. Keen registration that's down, is that a timing issue? And you talked about people are going to 1 year instead of 3 years, and the delays still hang over from the COVID where we weren't getting the registrations out?
I think it's both. I think it's a combination of the two. I think COVID is, we saw an upswing. We're probably settling back closer to what we had seen prior. And you're right, there's a 1, 2, and 3 year. And what we used to see when we had a fee increase in decades ago is that usually they would go from a 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year, and the 3 year would be the highest, obviously, and then it would be followed by 2 lower years of income.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the committee or the commission? Yes, sir.
Why are we seeing such a drastic loss in the wildlife fund there?
We made a deposit, a healthy deposit, November year before last, when the market was up. Now the market's down. And again, this is the valuation. So the valuation of that is much less than the other funds.
Okay.
Commissioner Butt, the treasurer invests in bond funds, and as you know, when the interest rate rises, the value of a lower interest rate bonds are falling. That bank in California collapsed because of it. The face value of the bond is less, even though we're still getting the coupons off of it. If we were to sell it, we would lose that money. But if we don't sell it until things get the economy gets better and the interest rate may go down, those values will come back to what we invested. Is that pretty accurate, Ken?
Yes.
So that's the representation for the greater devaluation.
That's the principal balance. We're still getting a return. If it's 3, 4, 5% or whatever, it's just the face value of the bond is not as worth what it was when we bought it. But as interest rates come back down and those bonds become more popular, that face value will come back to more nearly where we invested. So we don't lose anything until we sell it. So if we don't sell that, we're good. Anybody else got any questions? Audience? That's all for you, Frank. Ken, thank you. Frank Fiss.
Thank you, Chairman Cox. So I have today 2024 budget expansions to request, and we approach staff this time each year to see if there's any projects that they urgently need to expand budget for FY24 starting July 1. We limited these projects to those that would be equipment or projects that they need to get started on in July 1, maybe a tractor that's in desperate need, or funds that are coming from external sources that need to be set up in contracts. And it takes a couple months to set up a contract. So we want to have that money on the book, so to speak, so that when we write the contract, we can show that we intend to fund the contract. So that's another one. And lastly, vehicles. We work with MBM downtown to purchase vehicles, and they need to know how many we expect to buy in the coming year sooner than our budget. So with those three conditions, we vetted the projects that were proposed by staff, and we landed on 21 projects that will result in $3,580,700 worth of expansion to the wildlife budget only, as opposed to the boating budget. And most of these projects are reimbursable through either federal grants for wildlife restoration, Pittman Robertson, endangered species, Department of Energy, and in a big way, some of them the wetland fund. So because of those reimbursements, when the net result will actually be a gain of $193,000 to the wildlife fund. So I'm going to go through each of the projects individually by this table here. Run through them pretty quick. If you have any questions, let me know. First one's a vehicle for that's needed at Priest WMA, a tractor at ADC WMA, the Oak Ridge, at Oak Ridge Wildlife Management Area, the deer check stations are funded and reimbursed by the Department of Energy. On North Cumberland WMA, the miners that were the surface miners that held a bond on those lands that we manage, that term has come up. So now we have to manage the roads that they were managing. So we're going to need additional funds of $100,000 a year for probably for at least the next 5 years to maintain those roads. A lot of gravel. This project is being reimbursed by Pittman Robertson and the wetland fund. So that's one where we can pull from both sources. And lastly, a vehicle for law enforcement. I'm going in order of the user code numbers, but these are mostly wildlife projects right now and one law enforcement. Okay, we switch over to some biodiversity division projects. The SWIG reimbursement here, that's the state wildlife grant. These are grants for interns and projects for restoration of species of greatest conservation need, like hellbender, streamside salamander, and they're doing some in vitro mussel propagation work at the Cumberland River Aquatic Center. So these projects are a total $30,000, and a lot of these SWIG projects are matched, so there's no state dollars involved in them. The next one is the State Wildlife Action Plan. We're required to revise that every 10 years or so, and we're in that process with our partners. The partners are making the match on this, so we're asking for $125,000 for it. Indiana bat monitoring is something we do with TVA, and they're reimbursing for this project. Next one is aerial wildlife research. These are passive receivers that detect any animals that have transmitters on them that fly by. So it works with a host of species, and that's reimbursed through Pitt and Robertson funds. Likewise, with the funding for the winter cave monitoring, we're working with the TNC is the Nature Conservancy, so they're a partner on those projects. The next three are specific grants that we get from the Endangered Species Act, our funding, and we want to keep the grants separate in our books so that we can report our spending correctly to the Endangered Species program. And the next three projects just allow us to do that accounting and receive those dollars to do the work. Okay, this is the last slide here. The first project here is at Laurel Hill WMA. We have some erosion issues there that we need to address quickly. And this project is reimbursable through the wetland fund because we own the land. At Reelfoot, the spillway there it manages water levels, but there is work to be done to monitor water levels and I guess develop a protocol for getting those water levels right. These funds go towards that monitoring and management effort. It's reimbursed through the Pitt and Robertson Fund and the Wetland Fund. The next project is a reimbursement, or actually we already have the check for this one, from the Tallahassee Fund. And this is the mitigation monies that come to the agency for management activities associated with the Little Tennessee River that has impoundments on it that are managed by Brookfield Smoky Mountain Hydropower. They give us funds to stock fish, maintain access areas, and things like that. The next few projects are biodiversity projects. They are propagation and restoration of cracking pearly mussel for $47,000. Again, these are all endangered species funds, this ES. The blue mass darter recovery, boulder darter recovery, those are similar projects where we have partners that match these funds. Harms Mill Dam removal is an important opportunity to create some connectivity on the waterway on the Elk River. And it will not only help all the species in the Elk River, it also help the boulder darter, which is kind of cut off from some of its habitat by that dam. And the last one here is back to a wildlife management project. This is quail management for early successional habitat to benefit quail at a variety of our WMAs. And some of the WMAs are owned by the state or by Tennessee Wildlife, and some aren't. But we've figured out roughly the proportion that would be available to be reimbursed by the Wetland Fund, and all of them would be reimbursable by Pittman Robertson funds. So that concludes the 21 budget expansions that we're requesting for FY24, and some of them continue into the future years as indicated in the years column.
Thank you, Frank, for
in the years column.
Thank you, Frank, for my benefit, but more benefit for the newer commissioners. Would you please take just 2 minutes to explain what the State Wildlife Action Plan is and why it needs to be revised every so often?
The State Wildlife Action Plan is a document that details all the species of greatest conservation need, and there's dozens, if not hundreds of them, looking at hundreds of species, and all their habitat needs, all the things that threaten them, and all the activities that should be done to protect those animals so they don't end up on an endangered species or threatened species list. We want to protect them before they get into that much trouble. And there is funding associated. You have to have that plan to get the state wildlife grants, which is what those grants are called that come for that. So we have to have a plan in place. The Fish and Wildlife Service determines the timeline for when those plans have to be revised, and we're up on one of those deadlines to revise that plan.
And this is not just non-game or endangered species. This is deer and turkeys and everything.
If they're considered greatest conservation need, an example that comes to mind, I believe at one of the versions we had paddlefish on there. It was brook trout is on there. It's a conservation need species. And so there can be that overlap, but by and large, a deer is not greatest conservation need.
Need to be threatened.
It needs to have some threats on the landscape and be kind of rare enough to warrant that.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions by the Budget Committee?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
So move.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question
Second.
by the commission? You got a question?
Frank, you tell me again, the Brookfield, that 21,800, I know they reimbursed us or paying us for it. What are they doing with that?
They being a private power company, they're required to go through a FERC relicensing every so often, and their FERC relicensing mitigation plan said that they would work with Tennessee Wildlife for one entity to manage the natural resources in that area to the best they can to mitigate for the damages that the dam and the water use causes. So that's an opportunity we get to do with a private entity that we don't do with, say, the Corps of Engineers or TVA. But that aside, that's a project that they've been funding for, oh gosh, probably 20 years now. It feels like that, maybe 15, 20 years. But specifically, I know from my fish time that they reimburse for all the trout that are stocked in Calderwood and Chilhowie. There's access areas that were put in. We have law enforcement, I believe, that work that area that can get some of this reimbursement towards their salary as well.
Well, that's what I was thinking. They used to fund an officer.
Yeah,
fully fund an officer.
But this is an expansion. If there's other money that's already coming, we may already have that, and I'm not sure which way that is right now.
I got you. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody on the commission? I've got a motion and a so moved. All in favor on the Budget Committee, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that's all what the Budget Committee has.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Cox. At this time, we'll convene the full commission to take up the matters just discussed in the budget. And with that said, back to you, Commissioner Cox.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met and voted to recommend approval of the budget expansions for FY24, and I so move.
Thank you so much. With hearing that,
I'll second it.
Oh, there's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
So move. Motion passes. All right. Are we missing anything? Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Missing any business? Missing any business? Jason, any business? Final comments from the public or from any of the commissioners?
Thanks again for the people that fixed our food, the crappie fishermen and the shrimp and all was fabulous. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Get Chuck real quick. Commissioner Yost?
Hope this works. Yes. I wanted to take a moment and I'm going to step out of my TDEC role for just a moment and step into my role on the executive board for the Tennessee chapter of the Wildlife Society and thank the agency for the great support of our recent annual meeting. We had a 3-day meeting recently. It's the first time we've been able to do that since the pandemic. And it was just unbelievable the amount of the support that the agency gave us. There were many divisions within TWA that helped support that. Yeah, and so in all levels of staff, and I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of the different types of support. We had service on the executive board, planning the meeting, student presentation, judges, many presentations, including from the executive director, professional poster, and then they also supported our auction, which did a lot of good fundraising for our future meetings. So it was a really big lift by the agency, and it was above and beyond, normal duties. So I wanted to make a special point to thank the agency for that support.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Granberry?
Jason and staff, in preparation for next month when we do the season settings, it would be very helpful for me to understand the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service contract relative to the splits on the duck seasons and only allowing us to have one season. And that goes into how the calendar falls, if y'all could have that information. And finally, we all heard Mr. Bentz today, and it was my honor to nominate Earl for this Legacy Award. And I think his speech today and what he has meant to this agency and this state is sort of self-evident by what he had to say. And it was my honor to nominate him, and I appreciate the support of this commission and accepting him as the 2023 Legacy Award winner.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Granberry. Any other comments? Executive Director, do you have any final comments?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. I have a second.
Second.
Adjourned.
Good job.
Yeah.